Welcome to Conversations with Shem. Our focus is to show how to put the human back into healthcare. You're about to watch an episode in the 6-week series where I interview doctors about the health crisis in America today.
Hi, everybody. My name is Donna Coriel, and I am the creator of SoMeDocs and this incredible new series. It's a 6-part series in which Samuel Shem is the host. We are so excited. I have a panel that's backstage that I'm actually looking at right now that is just incredible. And we are coming to you each week on Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time in this new interactive show. So our goal is to discuss how to put the human back into medicine. So without further ado, I'm going to actually have Samuel Shem come in onto the stage, but I want to make sure that you all at home are interacting. So use the comment section wherever you're watching. If you're watching this on YouTube or on the Facebook page, you can interact in the comment section. We will flash certain comments that are relevant. And of course, the Q&A section is where you can ask questions of both Shem and the panel. Each week, we have a different set of physicians on the 3-physician panel. So that's going to be exciting. And live viewers, again, we want you interacting. So tell us now how you think that we can put the human back into medicine. All right, we're going to get into it. There's 4 parts. Shem's going to speak. We got the panel, Q&A, and then there's going to be a reading. So without further ado,
Thanks, Dana. Thanks the guests for coming. I have to admit I'm a little bit nervous. I've never done this, been on a podcast with me in this way. And I am reminded of a law in the House of God, number 4. Law number 4 of the House of God is at a cardiac arrest, the first procedure is to take your own pulse. So it looks okay, and I guess I'll keep on. I'm very excited to talk about this idea of how to be human in medicine because it's gotten kind of inhuman, and I will talk a lot more, and we'll all talk a lot more about how that is for doctors, nurses, patients, etc., and only better really for the healthcare industry. The House of God started me on this journey in 1978. But I have to go back a little bit further to talk about that, in that I'm a product of the 60s. In the 60s, we found out that if we got together and protested in ways that we needed to, we could get some justice. We were really against injustice at that time. And lo and behold, we stopped the Vietnam War and we put the civil rights on the books. And so that's in my blood. And that started me on my journey, as I said. And the we were rather, our class was rather radical in medical school, and we were idealistic, so that when our ideals that we brought into the house of God clashed with the hierarchy's wishes, all of a sudden I got the idea with my friends, and a little voice in my head said, hey, this is not just. Somebody has to do about this. These, hey, wait a second moments that we all have at various times. So many, hey, wait a second moments piled up in the book that I had to get writing. And that's what I did. And it was a mess in the beginning, but after 7 drafts, it was a book. And I figured somebody had to write it, and it was going to be me. I realized a couple of things when I started the book. It was so awful that it had to ride on humor if it was going to work. If nobody would read it unless it rode on humor. And I have a little tiny piece of it that's an example of that. The run put a pill on his hamburger and munched it down. I asked what it was. He said, Valium, vitamin V. I've never been so nervous in my life. Does the Valium help? Well, he said, it makes me feel kind of sleepy, but I feel pretty unflappable. I'm writing orders for it for all my patients. What? You're putting all of them on Valium too? Why not? They're all very nervous having me as their doctor. As most of the humor that's in the book, that was true. All of that was true. In fact, almost all of it was true. And then I did a funny thing after the book came out. And that was, I was very idealistic as a writer. And I thought writers didn't go out and tout their books. So it was hard to get to me because I took a pen name, and it was before the internet. But for 2 years, I never took an invitation that came along. And then one time I got a letter from my publisher in New York. You remember letters, those things, you know. And I opened it up and it said, I'm in a VA hospital in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And if it weren't for your book, I'd kill myself. And I said, hey, wait a second. Maybe people want to hear what I have to say through my going through this suffering and coming out the other end. From that day on, I almost always took invitations. And at first, of course, Harvard hated me and did very nasty things to me. And sometimes the dean would cancel a speech if the students wanted me to come. But I just kept on, and all of a sudden, you know, after 40 years, it's here to stay. Let's put it that way. So why the reason that I write, the reason I'm here and we're here, all of us, is to deal with injustice. And how do we do that? What is the danger in our profession? It's the danger of being inhuman is the danger of isolation, and the healing power of good connection. That's what I've come up with. The danger of isolation and the healing power that is good connection. And the question that we can go into is, what's a good connection? Well, a good connection is always a mutual connection. If it's not that mutual, it's not that good. And that's something we can talk about more. I think you know what the issues are that are not healthy for doctors and that are really hurting us. And that is the screens, the computer screens, of course, and money. The only thing, it's worse for doctors, it's worse for patients, it's worse for nurses, et cetera, and other healthcare workers. And the only good people it's made for is the insurance industry and other parts of the healthcare industry. And I want to just say one more thing, since we just had this remarkable election the other day. I'd be amiss if I did not. And no matter what your politics are, I'm not going to talk about that. But what we do know is that finally we are going to have movements toward an attention to the COVID and a better healthcare system. I really do believe that that's going to happen. And bravo for all of us. So I'm really looking forward to this series. It's quite a remarkable thing. And in fact, I'm an idealist in a crazy way. I think what we discuss here may have reverberations now through, the medical system, and maybe even to people who would listen and have a lot more power than we do. And as I said, as Dana said, at the end of this, toward the end of this video we're going to do, I'm going to introduce you to another book that I got lucky. I got back into medicine after I was out of it for a long time, when I got a call from NYU Medical School, and they said, out of the blue, this is 5 years ago, how would you like to be a professor of medicine at NYU? And they wanted me to teach the House of God at NYU. Remember, Harvard hated me for it. And all of a sudden, I was back in medicine, clear-eyed, because I'd been totally out of it, really. And I saw two things that were happening in medicine now that were dehumanizing doctors and others. This was the cause. I just grabbed at it and I said, hey, somebody's got to write about this. And I guess it was me. And what I saw on the wards and the rounds and talking to everybody was it was a time when medicine could go one of two ways, either more toward human care or toward money and screens, which means money and money. And that's what you'll hear at the end of this cast.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Shem. That was the beginning part, and we are now going to introduce our panel. So stay tuned. All right, so I'm going to be introducing the panel and then bringing Shem back up. He's going to take a breather and maybe sip a little water in the meantime. And we're going to introduce our physician panel. So Dr. Kimmery Martin comes first. This is her answer to how we put the human back into medicine. And so she told us in advance, by allowing physicians to focus on the needs of the patient, we will put the human back into medicine. So welcome to Kimmery Martin. Hi.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. We're excited to hear what you have to say. And I'm going to now introduce the next physician, and then I'm going to have everybody up at once. The next physician is Dr. Jason Campbell, who answered to us, if we take our job seriously, but never take ourselves too seriously, we will most certainly put the human back into medicine. And so this is Dr. Jason Campbell. Hello and welcome.
Hey, thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for being here. And then finally, we have Dr. Niran Al-Agba. I hope that I said that right. And she said physicians should go back to doing what they love. Practicing eyes up medicine is the only way to put the human back into medicine. So did I get that right?
You were perfect. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Sure. And I'm going to actually add the whole panel and then add Shem and take myself off. So Shem.
Hello. Oh, we're alone at last.
Alone.
Well, let's just open it up. I want to hear more about what you think about all this, and we'll start a dialogue.
I'm not sure why it went to me first in the screen, but maybe because I'm screen free the rest of my life. So I do get to practice the kind of medicine you were talking about. I still have a dictaphone and a transcriptionist, and my practice is about to celebrate its 50th anniversary. My father started it. We're on third and fourth generation families. We took care of great grandparents as children. and then grandparents and parents, and now I'm seeing those babies. And so I feel like the human for me has remained because I kind of refuse to do it any other way.
Uh-huh. That's amazing. And what, how have you been able to maintain this, from your father's generation? That's interesting. He's at least as old as me, probably.
Well, he passed away. He worked till he was 81. So he was a physician in the mid 50s and then came over here as an immigrant from Iraq. And he, by way of England, where he did his pediatrics training. And he came to this little town that I've grown up in, Bremerton, across from Seattle, and opened his own practice. And, it's been interesting. I worked with him for 16 years before he retired. And we just love it. He loved it. I mean, he said he didn't know what else he would do. And I love it. And I think we've been able to maintain it because, like you were talking about fighting injustice, I'm a real fighter. And I insist that I'm staying on paper. I'll take the fines, which haven't really come through. And I like paper and I like having a paper chart because I do get to practice eyes up. I get to watch people. I get to ask them questions. And I think so much is lost when we're entering stuff in a computer. And since I have the choice to do that, I'm just going to stay that way.
Yeah. Nice. No, you might get charged for writing on paper.
I think they talk about fining us, but that really hasn't happened. And I'm in an underserved area. So, I mean, I think we don't have that many primary care doctors. And usually the insurance companies will kind of work with me. And if they want to audit, they come and scan the charts as opposed to trying to send them over the internet. And I just say I don't do that. I don't have an electronic health record. So I can't even understand what they're talking about most of the time.
That's just remarkable. I haven't heard that story ever, in modern medicine. Have you guys, and girls, sorry, women, have you heard about anybody else who's doing that kind of thing?
Well, interestingly, I asked in a online group of physicians today how people viewed the lack of a human element in medicine. And one of the responses that I got from someone was that they switched to concierge medicine because they were able to have more autonomy and have more time with patients. And I'm emergency medicine, and over the course of my career, I think the corporatization of medicine has led to the most important element in our profession transitioning away from outcomes for patients and away from patient experiences and away from the relationship between the patient and the physician into a more purely financial transaction that physicians aren't in control of. And I hear it from every doctor I talk to, how much they long to be able to practice medicine the way they think it should be done.
Well, I love hearing that. I love using the word long to. Mm-hmm. I think that's right, because, personally, and everybody I knew in medicine when I was really in it all the time, the excitement is when a person walks into your room. Yeah. And you have this challenge, you have this challenge, hard, not so hard, maybe, but the thing that will, make a difference is the connection that you foster immediately, right? That's one of the new laws, in Man's Fourth Best Hospital, is that connection comes first. If Yes. You're connected, you hear everything. If you're not connected, you don't hear anything. And so I'm so glad, longing for that. And we've lost it, if not are losing it. And I'm so happy to hear that. I'm so happy, I can't tell you, so grateful to have you four here and really trying to, okay, let's tell each other and others who are listening what has gone wrong and what we can do about it. So, so far so good. Next.
Well, I won't.
In return to that, I'm sorry, Kimmery.
Okay, thanks so much. Yeah, so I won't say I'm the youngest. I'll say I'm the least experienced on this panel. And so this is a pleasure getting a chance to hear from all of you. And I'm also an anesthesiology resident. So, bringing that to the table, I do agree with you, Dr. Shem, that for us, those first 5 minutes, those first 10 minutes that we meet a patient are crucial. I personally try to chart the night before so that when I get to meet with the patient that morning, it's just eyes up, as Dr. Al-Agba said, eyes up, look at you, talk, how are you feeling? How can I comfort you and make this very vulnerable experience better? Because obviously going under the knife, going under surgery is something that we all have probably been scared about a little bit if we've had an operation. Like I said, I'm the least experienced here. What that equates to is that I remember when I was in 3rd grade doing my little touch typing in my little school in DC. And so I'm very good with computers. So the other side of the argument is that I do feel like I can be very efficient charting with computers. I'm also charting while the patient is asleep or should be asleep. And so then, it's a little bit of a different dynamic. But I definitely think that Eyes Up was beautifully put, and that the more that we are talking to people and giving them the comfort that we would want to give ourselves or our family and loved ones is exactly what we need to go back and return to the humanization of medicine.
Yeah. Yeah. So what do you think is really the cause here? Why has this gotten so bad? So it seems like pretty soon, for our profession. Anybody?
I think the farther we're separated from our patient, so the more people, and I've said this a lot, the more people that are in between me and my patient, the less human that medicine feels. So for me, for example, it's me and my patient. I mean, they know where I live. Sometimes I see them here at my house. Sometimes I see them, wherever they are in town. My patient and I know exactly what's going on. They know what's going on in my life, and I know what's going on in their life. Now, when you remove that, and again, some of it's not on purpose. In an ER, I mean, you can't know the patient the way I know the patient, and that's understandable. But if you have a scribe, which again is understandable, but you add another person in the room, and you add, let's say, another, you're supervising maybe someone who's a non-physician. So now you've added another person in between. And then you've added a number of other helpers, whether it's a nurse, a pharmacist, whatever your other personnel are. The more people in between you and your patient directly interacting, I think takes away humanity. And that doesn't mean those jobs aren't necessary. I want to be very clear. But then you add an insurance company, and then you add your hospital CEO. I get to be the CEO of my own practice. And so again, you have a hospital administrator, maybe a department head, CEO of the hospital, an overall leader. These are layers of dominoes stacking up. Sort of, if you picture them standing indoors or being doors between you and your patient, I think that's how it got so bad so quickly. And if you look at the growth of administrators and CEOs in healthcare compared to physicians in healthcare, so it's exponentially different. Obviously, CEOs and administrators have outpaced us massively, and I think that's how it happened so quickly.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else?
I fully agree with that. You look at a practice that's run by a private equity firm, and they're going to have different measure of success than a physician would. What's good there is to have 100% of your beds filled, to have high cost procedures performed. Now, I'm not suggesting that people do things purely for profit, but that is a different measure of success than we have on an elemental level with our patients.
Yeah.
And I'll kind of transition that into the other side of, I think one way that we can mitigate this is also how we take care of ourselves as physicians, and how we recover and rejuvenate ourselves after a long shift, whether that's a 8 to 12 hour emergency medicine shift, or seeing a ton of patients that so well that aren't doing well, and how that, I'm sure that's something that you carry with you day in and day out. And just for me, you want every operative case to go well. We know, unfortunately, that's not always the case. And so how do we, say to ourselves, leave one night and come back the next day excited once again to care for patients, and to also treat ourselves well, and be okay saying, like, today wasn't the best day, but tomorrow can be a great day.
Yeah. And now, what I did, as you heard, I hadn't been in medicine. I'd given up medicine. I'd been a psychiatrist for about 20 years, but I'd always wanted to be a doctor. I had a choice at Oxford after when I was finishing my Rhodes Scholarship. I either could go to Vietnam or Harvard Med. I thought, well, maybe instead of killing people, I would try to save them, But I always went, maybe I know some of you are writers, so you might
all of us
with this. All of you are writers, sorry. I didn't know that you were, was I didn't want to write for money. I didn't want to have to write for money because I thought that would pollute what I thought was a wonderful thing that I wanted to do. So I thought I would go to medical school because, medical school is so vast. If you're into, bugs, you can go there. If you're into countries, you can go there. I mean, it's a whole gamut, right? So I decided I would try to find something that would allow me time to write. And luckily, at the end of the medical school, I found psychiatry. And, you hear good stories, you learn about character, and I won't have to go in till the afternoon. And so for 25 years, I did that. I split it between writing in the morning and then going to see patients, which was a lot harder than I thought. I mean, for me to have the COVID not go out of the house thing and do everything on Zoom now, this is heaven for me. This is heaven for me. So anyway. So what about you as writers? I mean, I get to things, I get to my understanding, and I get to people and hopefully try to help them along through my writing. How about you guys, you people?
I mean, I started writing for, I actually have a column in my hometown, and I've written for the Seattle Times and a few other larger publications about injustice, basically. And I see things my patients experience or that I see that I get frustrated with about insurance companies or things that constrain me in any way, shape, or form. And even writing against kind of my local hospital monopoly, that's and writing things like when my dad died and thanking the community because they took such good care of me when my dad was sick for all those weeks. And so for me, it's a way of working out whatever I'm going through. And if it's helpful to others or it helps move an injustice forward that I see that I want to call attention to, then I write. So I feel like it's a little bit for me, like Dr. Campbell was talking about for self-care. I think the one that was published in the Seattle Times is about Alabama's abortion law. And I came home and really angry and I just pounded away on the keys and sent it in. So again, it's for me just kind of a way, maybe like a virtual diary of sorts, working through my practice and my life.
Uh-huh. What kind of reactions do you have from what you write?
Well, it depends. The community, when I wrote about white privilege after Ahmaud Arbery died, I think my town, which is kind of conservative, called me a lot of names. but you know what? I feel like if it's truth and if it's my truth or if it's something that I think is really important that people need to think about, then it was worthwhile to take the risk. And again, I hear supportive comments and I hear negative comments, but I think as both of my co-panelists will probably attest to, then if we're making people think, I think we've done something important.
Yep. Anybody else?
Well, I write medical fiction novels. So I got into that mainly because I'm a fairly obsessive reader, but I have found I teach writing courses for physicians and speak at medical schools, and I have found an extraordinary number of physicians are writers. And I think partly it's something inherent in our brains, the kind of person that's interested in both science and patient interaction also is somebody usually that's pretty good at telling a narrative. But also I think, there's something unique about fiction in particular, which is that if you read a lot of fiction, almost by necessity, you become not just more knowledgeable about whatever the subject is, but you become more empathetic. You're literally seeing the world through the eyes of somebody else. And so that presents a remarkable opportunity to tell the stories of physicians and patients. My first book was kind of just purely entertainment. My second book was more of an issues-themed novel. And wow, it really did open me up to a whole world of judgment. I live in a conservative part of the South, and it's very different being exposed to opinions on a nonstop basis, which the internet has certainly changed. But I also do a lot of political writing, and that plays into it. And I think you just have to accept who you are and stay true to yourself when you do this.
What was the book you were describing? You blurred out a little bit. That was difficult for you.
My second novel was loosely inspired by the real life experience of a colleague who was instructed to stop treating transgender patients by her practice administrators because the medical therapies for transgender patients conflicted with their beliefs, and she refused to stop and she was fired. So that very loosely inspired my second novel called The Antidote for Everything.
Uh-huh. I loved what you said about, and I think we all agree, if you ever try to write, Tolstoy, who's one of my giants, of course, everybody's giant, he said, I've never forgotten this, or he wrote this, the measure of an author is the love he shows his characters. And that's always been really interesting to me, because I have a penchant for, when I start, right, like with the House of God, when I start with the chief of medicine, who really was a bad guy to us, and it's too bitter to actually put down there. And then gradually, I'm sure we've all had that in anything you write, gradually you get to know them and you get to know their side a little bit. And it's only successful if you can get to their side, isn't it? And then you have the best characters I've written, in a way, I think, are ones that are, quote, the bad guys, but you feel for them. And actually that's true in Man's Fourth as well. And you can sort of hear a click, right, when you get it. Yeah. And
yeah, absolutely. And I think that, the number one thing I've learned from writing is stay out of the comments. I let my friends sometimes in the comments, but I've learned you got to have some thick skin and stay out of the comments. One thing I want to use this as an opportunity to say that there were two reasons that I started writing. And this, hopefully, to those out there that are maybe deciding whether or not this is for them, I hope that my anecdote helps. I had a mentor in medical school who was a internal medicine, or excuse me, a neonatology physician. And she said, hey, I don't know what happened with your chemistry or with, that one exam, but gosh, you can write. And so I never forget, because she was always very transparent. And she's like, we need you to do better here on cardiac, but keep writing. Like, that's going to take you somewhere one day. And so I kept doing it. And I was writing reflections in medical school, just like everyone else here has said, thinking about who's a patient that reminded me of my grandmother, or who's a patient that I saw maybe treated unfairly. And then little by little, this led to more stories and me practicing my writing and my craft. And then the other reason I'm here today, I think, is because of Twitter. So I got on Twitter just to graduate medical school. As crazy as that's going to sound, I needed one more class, an elective. And so they said, there's a social media elective, Jason. I said, sign me up for that. So, the story, the history's there, but sometimes you have to go with things that you don't even know what it's going to lead to, but having those doors open, trusting yourself, acknowledging the beauty and the science that is medicine, as the other two panelists have so beautifully articulated, is what I think all of us enjoy about writing and about being a physician.
Yeah. Any questions you each want to ask the other?
No, but there was one comment that Jason kind of inspired me to sort of say, which was, he was talking about self-care, and that's another element, obviously, of putting the human back in medicine. And I really encourage my colleagues, just in various social media groups and those that I meet, that you can make your medical career anything you want if you really are open to it. And you talked about being a psychiatrist and working in the afternoons. I am literally a solo pediatrician, and I work 20 hours a week. And I usually can see patients pretty quickly, because obviously I've known them since they were born, or I took care of their parents as children. So I always say I have such an easier job than, say, an ER doc who has to meet someone and then know all the ins and outs. I already have all that in my brain. But I really work 9 to 2, 4 days a week. And I manage a really full practice with 3,000 patients. And it's so doable to then, I have 4 young children that are under 12 and under. And so it lets me be a mom. It lets me be a mom, most of the time, and it lets me have a life. And again, patients will get a hold of me on a weekend for an emergency, but those are really few and far between. And so again, I just really encourage people out there who are listening to this, that even though we're ER, anesthesia, psychiatry, pediatrics, I really think you can make your career what you want it to be. And you can be in all medicine or no medicine or part-time or whatever you want. And I think that sometimes we're not as open to the possibilities as we should be.
Mm-hmm. I have done that as well, shifted away from clinical medicine.
One at a time. Who spoke first?
Kimmery, you're up.
I also have restructured my life to make it work better. When I started getting really involved in writing and my first book sold, I shifted my job a little bit, and I gradually took a completely different job and then restructured that. So I think at a certain point in your career, you might be itching to try something new. You might be wanting to pursue an interest or a hobby or a passion, and there are ways to make that work. We're not locked into one thing forever. Having said that, it's difficult. I mean, it does require sacrifice to do anything well, right? It's not an easy path to be a physician at all, and then throw writing into the mix, and you make it much more complicated. But I agree with Niran that you can restructure your life to work for you.
Yes, as the resident currently, I'll say you can restructure your life down the road. And not necessarily right now, and that's okay. Training is amazing, and learning from people like all the panelists and Dr. Shem here in my own right is great. I don't have a book. One day, if you enjoy some of the blogs that I've written or some of the Seattle Times, like Dr. Niran, then JC of the DC.blog, and you can check out some of my writing there. So thank you so much.
You're all great, really. And I really am. I mean, I'm out of. I teach a little at NYU, mostly about the book and all of that stuff. But it's really refreshing to see people who are going through what is really. It's not harder than what we had in some ways, but I don't know. I'll put this out there. I don't think it applies to many of you, but the upcoming generation, ones below you, seem very timid about trying anything out of the ordinary, like, really going for writing or something like that. I don't know if that's true. Are we over the...
Well, I don't think that you can hear the music that I put on, so I decided to just show my face as a sign that we are going to wrap up the panel and go into the Q&A. So I wanted you to just finish your thought, and then we can go into the Q&A and ask questions.
Yeah, I just was, the students that I teach, they seem a little more timid, trying, like they're scared of it. Is that just me, do you think? Or if you all know what's coming up behind you?
Yeah, I mean, I just worked with some medical students from George Washington, and they all seem pretty interested about writing. But I think to take that leap of faith seemed like it was a question, And I said, oh, man, like, you're already in medicine. Like, you've had a leap of faith. Now, maybe you had amazing scores and grades, and you always thought like medicine was a definite. But anyone who knows medicine is not a definite. So I was like, just to be where you are now, use that same thing in other areas of your life and see what happens.
Yeah, that's great. It's great.
All right. So with that, we are going to, you guys stay where you are because you're part of the Q&A. So here we go. All right. Makes me laugh. Okay. Let us bring in some of these questions. I have a whole bunch. So let's spend the next 10 to 15 minutes on questions. To you at home who are watching, this is our fabulous panel and Dr. Shem right here. You can ask questions now because it'll be easier for me to find them if they pop up. Thank you for loving the drum roll. I appreciate that. All right. Let's look for, there were some great questions already. So I'm going to scroll through and throw it out there both for Shem and for our panelists. So Akash Sharma asks, do any of you offer online writing classes or recommend any for physicians interested in writing?
I do.
Jason, yeah, sure. Jason and Kimmery. Jason, go first.
No, I was just pointing at Dr. Kimmery. I was pointing above me, like Hollywood Square.
This is right there.
Kimmery,
well, I will say I did not know how to write a novel when I wrote my first novel, which is not the approach I would recommend. But I have gotten more educated since that time. Yes, so I typically teach a course once or twice a year called Fiction Writing for Physicians, which is in person in Florida and didn't happen this year. So I've been doing some online courses just to teach the basics of fiction, especially geared toward medical fiction. And I don't want to self-promote on this venue, but there are tons of great writing courses out there. Once the world opens back up, I really like the Writer's Digest course in New York City. There's also a fantastic one, if you can ever take time off, in Iceland every year, called the Iceland Writers Retreat. I'll tell you what, I'll send a list to Dana of writing resources I recommend.
Yeah, not only that, but please self-promote. I mean, you came on here and you gave your time, so absolutely self-promote. I'm okay with that.
Oh, thank you.
So you'll let us know afterwards where people can find your course.
Sure.
And SOMI Docs is also coming up with resources. We have our Tuesday night lectures at 9 p.m. and we have a few writers that are coming on to teach us little pearls on writing. And that specific series is actually non-physicians. So it's interesting to mesh the two. Okay, this is an interesting question. Did anyone here go through burnout? Shem, did you go through burnout, interestingly?
No, I think I caused burnout in those days.
What do you think of that term?
I found out just last year that they tried to fire me from the Beth Israel Hospital, which was the House of God, midway through. And they thought that I had lied on my CV because I looked great on paper, you know, the Rhodes Scholar and all of that stuff. And then they validated that, and they needed another person like me to work there, so they didn't fire me. But yeah.
Fabulous. All right. Anybody else? Did anybody like go through something specifically interesting where it comes to burnout and maybe have an aha moment?
Well,
I think. Oh, go ahead, Kimmery.
You go ahead. You go ahead.
I mean, I was going to say probably the hardest time for me, again, my dad and I were working together. He had a full schedule because he didn't anticipate dying. And so I went about 6 weeks with really relatively no days off and a double schedule because I had to see my patients and his patients, you know, with accommodations. But again, it was pretty overwhelming. And I'll tell you what was amazing. And that's probably the closest to burnout I've ever been. But what was amazing is patients would look at me and say, have you eaten today? Did you sit down today? And if you haven't, I'm going to go buy you lunch at Starbucks. What do you want? And I'll pick it up and I'll come back and give it to you. And many times then, because it was a double schedule, I was 2 and 3 hours behind. So I think what contributes to burnout, at least in my experience, would be feeling like you can't win. So you're failing no matter where you turn. You feel like you can't be a good maybe mother or father. You can't be a good doctor. You can't be a good son or daughter, whatever it is, no matter how hard you try. And so I think what maybe saved me, and that's a part of where my writing really started, was my patients who recognized I was struggling. They recognized I was grieving. And I think if we can't recognize it, if others at least can and help us understand it, then we can kind of address it. And so I think to me, that's what really burnout is about, is just failing, seeing no way out. And I think that's what we need to try to give each other, is a way out.
Absolutely. Great answer. And we did have someone asking about Dr. Campbell's writing and or book. Do you want to quickly just tell us the name of it? I didn't realize you wrote a book, Jason.
No, I didn't. I was saying that I had written some different pieces in the Seattle Times, Chicago Tribune. Yeah, different editorials, which you can find at jcofthedc.blog. But kind of like other panelists here, I just write about things that I'm passionate about. I think that for me, that's been a lot about Black in America, Black men in medicine. I've written about my 97-year-old grandmother who's still alive and was watching Kamala Harris's speech a night or two ago. So all the emotions there, I know. So it was just, a lot of passion. And I think that's the key with all of us. It's what you're passionate about, who inspires you to write, who inspires you just to be. And I mean, for me, I think with burnout, what I've learned to say quickly is that I love being outside now. I mean, I'm in Portland, so, it could be raining. I'll just stand outside in the rain just to be outside and just to feel that level of relief, I guess, in a way. So I don't think I've ever gotten to burnout, but being outside, being within nature has really helped me feel whole and return to the hospital every day feeling my best.
Can I take one of these questions? I wanted to also respond to that. I think that what really gets you through the suffering that we go through, suffering is not optional, right? Everybody suffers, big suffering, little, everybody suffers. And in fact, we doctors are there at the most suffering parts of human beings' lives and help them to walk through it. And that is something that I certainly, when I was doing it more, had incredible gratitude for. So some kind of spiritual practice, it doesn't matter what it is, it means getting outside of this, right? Whatever it is, helps with all kinds of things. But I wanted to I saw a thing on the bottom of the screen, and I don't know if you can get it back again. But it really is crucial, and it was in response to my saying this younger generation is more timid or afraid or something like that, and someone pushed back, and they said, I don't know if you can get the particular one about we're called to just do all these algorithm. Yeah, I don't think younger physicians are timid, but they're being herded like sheep, expected to practice robot-like algorithm medicine without any human. All right, this gets my dander up. I mean, I have a lot of sympathy for that. But it's like the bigger picture of these big hierarchies taking control over us in medicine, right? Even good medical schools. NYU is a great medical school that I'm affiliated with now. But what has to happen is not to be afraid, and you have to stick together and come to some kind of way of not standing up by yourself. Now, in sticking together and resistance, all of the nonviolent resistance that has been put down in all these centuries, or certainly this century and the last, what you have to do, and I tell this to medical students when I hear this, if you want to try to make a change, you have to learn to be deft, D-E-F-T. You have to learn to be deft. You don't go like this. You get a bunch of people and you figure out, okay, what can we stand up for that maybe will not threaten, but will get us to the next step and the next step. And of course, I was educated that way, but that's really what's necessary now. And I know exactly what the person is saying. I hear this all the time. They're not seeing human stuff enough. So I had to answer that one.
Oh, absolutely. And I appreciate it. In fact, I have a question that is, first of all, I have a question for Dr. Al-Agba that I want to tell everybody that for those of you watching that are interested in the panelists' work, there's going to be links on the somidocs.com website to each one of these panelists. So if you want to read about one of their books, just click in and see. So Dr. Al-Agba, can you just give us like a 1 or 2 liner
Sure.
about the book that you have coming out?
So it's released next Monday. It's called Patients at Risk, The Rise of the Nurse Practitioner and the Physician Assistant in Healthcare. And it's co-authored with Rebecca Bernard, who's a DPC physician in Florida. And you know, it's interesting because I think that title at first makes you think we're against non-physicians, and we're not. What we're doing is talking about the corporatization of healthcare and all these sort of robot-like algorithms and how we're being forced to do it. And it weaves through a story of a young Black patient who dies. And there's so many layers because the family ended up winning a lawsuit. They won $6 million for wrongful death and against the hospital. But there's so many layers. It takes almost the whole book to kind of weave it with the data about non-physician practitioners in healthcare. That I think it's a really worthwhile read. I'm hoping it will change health policy in the country. I'm hoping it will change the way CEOs and corporations look at providing healthcare to patients. For me, everything's always been about my patients. I mean, they've been with me since I was born. I mean, they're families. And so for me, they are my family. And I think of this 19-year-old girl, Alexis Ochoa Dawkins, who the book is dedicated to. And her parents who've lost their daughter. And so to me, it was a passion project. Once I read that story, I couldn't let go of. So that's coming out next Monday. Thanks. I hope everybody buys it and reads it.
Send it to me.
I will. Okay.
And all of you can send it. You're right. You know, I'm at fshem.com, at comcast.net. Sorry.
Okay, I'll get that and write it down.
Great, making connections. So Shem, you've got the question next, and that's, can you comment on pain versus suffering? Is suffering eventual, or can we change our mindset toward it?
Well, pain is eventual. You know, suffering is, as the Buddha said, number one. You know, you can have big suffering, you can have little suffering. But the question that and it's interesting, we don't use the word suffering in medicine. I've tried to get people to use it. They won't do it. Like asking, if you ask somebody, where's the pain, you get a circumscribed, you know, under my arm or something. If you ask, what is your suffering, or what are you suffering, it opens up a whole different way of looking at the patient. And, you know, I mean, I guess that's all to say about that. Except
I would say you can see suffering, though. I'm sure as a psychiatrist, you can see suffering on someone's face. And to me, that's where I see suffering more.
But here's the thing. When you say something to a patient, like if you use the we, what should we do, as opposed to I'm going to do this, the patient comes back to you with, I think we should do. You plant the we, for instance, in between you like it's a thing, right? And it helps to do what I haven't gotten to really, which is what the magic and the wonder of medicine is, when you make that click of connection and the person tells you what's going to help them, you know, get better, you know. So it's interesting that suffering, which is what we are there for, we don't concretize it, you know.
So I'm actually going to end the Q&A segment, although there are still questions out there, but I welcome actually us to continue the discussion in our SoMeDocs Facebook group. We have a group for physicians where you can come and ask questions, but there's also another Facebook group called SoMeDocs Public. So if you aren't a physician and you have questions, especially about, first of all, about these panelists' books, secondly, about what we mean when we say we're burnt out, that is a space that I created so that we could start like realistic discussions between physicians and patients in order for us to get out to the public what's really happening behind the scenes. Like, why are physicians always talking about burning out? Why would physicians burn out? Like, they're so amazing, you know, they've got such an amazing spot that they're in life. And it's not exactly all that it seems. So I am going to officially close the panel. And I thank these panelists from the bottom of my heart. You guys are each doing incredible things for medicine. And I thank you just for being here and for doing what you do. So without further ado.
Beautiful, beautiful people.
Absolutely. And there's more to come. So here we go to our next section. Shem, be ready.
Okay, I'll end with a reading from the sequel to The House of God called Man's Fourth Best Hospital. And I was called to write this book because all of a sudden I was thrust into modern medicine. And the main things that I saw that were, hey, wait a second, somebody's got to write about this, are money and screens, which means money and money, since the screens are billing screens. So this is sort of what the book's about. I'll read a bit. Why am I here? The fat man said. Why are you? One day I looked around and I asked myself, self of fats, what else can you do for medicine? I answered, a lot. Medicine has gotten a lean and hungry look, and it's up to you and your guys, fats, to fatten it up. Why'd I recruit you? He wrote in chalk on the chalkboard. To put the human back in healthcare. We do it together. That sums up who we are, humane docs. And this, money kills care, screens make money, screens kill care. So I chose each of you because you've still got that fire inside. He's been brought in to save man's fourth best hospital and forms a public clinic that is part of it that he has total power over. So I chose each of you because you've still got that fire inside. In the house, we resisted, brought him screaming to the wall of fire. that is truth, and held their eyes open with red-hot toothpicks, making them see our agony, the agony of absurdity, right? Nods around the table. I felt that fire again, saw that fire in those eyes, that hope. But man, said Chuck, we didn't change nothing. I know, Fat said, but from the inhuman, we learned about being human, right? The seeds were there. Remember my slogan to you back then? Nobody remembered his slogan. Thanks a lot, sheesh. He seemed to deflate and then inflate again. I kept saying we had to learn to be with the patients. Remember? When he mentioned it, both of us nodded. Make them feel like they're still part of life, part of some grand, nutty scheme instead of alone with their diseases. Even young Bash here once said, what these patients wanted was what anyone wanted, the hand in their hand, the sense that their doctor could care. Maybe said, eat my dust, Eddie, but we didn't change anything, and then we scattered. True, because we had no power, Fat said. When the power came down on us from the top, we got isolated from each other, right? Alone, we started thinking, I'm crazy for thinking this is crazy. But in any power over system based on race, gender, class, religion, sexual preference, etc., the only threat to the dominant group is the quality of the connections of the subordinate group. That's us. This time, we got leverage. I've got these guys over a barrel 6 ways from Sunday, and they only know about 3 of them. Long as we stick together, we got a chance to create something that'll shine. The one thing we got to do, stick together, no matter what. And maybe I'll leave with just saying something about our power. In a crowded theater, in the old days, certainly, if somebody falls down on the stage, does the cry go out, is there an insurance executive in the house? No. We're the doctors. We do the work. If we can just get together, especially under this new government that's coming in, if we can just get together and stick together, as the fat man said, we can reform our practice of medicine to healthier practice for us nurses and patients. So that's, I think, something to take up next week.
Fabulous. Well, I'd like to, without further ado, close this particular episode, episode number 1, our debut episode of 6 episodes this season. There's more exciting content to go over in the next few weeks because Shem is going to return each and every week on Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, but with a different physician panel of superstars each week. So tune in, check us out at somidocs.com. Everyone's all the panelists' bios are there. All the facilitators' bios are there. You can link up with them and see what they wrote. And that's it. I hope you all enjoyed it. Shem, thank you so much. I'm going to remove you from the screen. And if any of you have any comments or questions, reach out to me. I'm Donna Coriel, the creator of SoMeDocs. I will see you next week. Here's a little bit of who's coming up next week.